in Secwepemc territory.
Buffalo. Why you disappear?
Waikakaitap, request, Cookby Judy Wilson, request, I'm from the Secwepemc Ulu. We're in our neighboring territory right now, but my grandson's 7th birthday, so we're sort of fitting everything in our schedule today. My mother and my sister and I and my sister-in-law, mother-in-law, yeah. So we're here gathered to join you today in intercontinental actions today. And somebody's not muted. And I'm here with my mother, Elder Minnie Knars, here to my right, I guess might be your left. And then my sister, Joanne Buffalo, there. And we have also my friend here as well. We can't see her, there's so many in the picture here. So we're gathering to start of the Earth Week to begin in a good way, to extend to our solidarity and love and to the people of the streets that Minnesota and Chicago who mourn Dante Wright, George Floyd, and Black Lives That Matter. We're here joined by a powerful collection of matriarchs, leaders, and elders in advance of what a crucial year is for climate and the world. We held a ceremony on Wednesday for the water, and my mother and Joanne and Lorraine Arnus and Della Powder and Minnie and Joanne were with me. And also we had powerful opening remarks from Grand Chief Verna Polson. She's the one that did the hunger strike in Ottawa and the water strike. And she also was opposing some of the nuclear reactors or nuclear developments in her area. And we also had Ben Numsma from Hopi, and also Grace from New Mexico that joined us. So we had some very powerful prayers from quite a few people in the 4 directions to start us off in a ceremony in a good way. So this is the countdown to COP26 in Scotland, a huge global climate conference that may be postponed till spring 2022 because of the pandemic. But we are demanding that the banks, insurance companies, and asset managers who are shoveling cash into new fossil fuel projects while the world burns to stop financing, insuring, and investing in fossil fuels. We're also demanding these financial institutions adopt the free, prior, informed consent of Indigenous peoples into their business models to avoid climate catastrophe. Eugene Kung, along with a longtime ally from West Coast environmental law, will take us through the revolutionary implications of respecting Indigenous rights. So we start today with a prayer, or we begin today by holding a water blessing. So our water goes right here. And I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to grab some water. Oh yeah, some people are showing me the water. And my mother's holding water, her and her friend Pat White collected all over North America. And there were contributions of water from different parts of the world as well. So she's got the bottle labeled appropriately. It's called Water from Everywhere. It went to ocean in ceremony. So we take so please take a moment and focus on the bowl or glass of water that you brought with you, so we can all participate in this water blessing together. I'd like to introduce Casey Camp Horinek, who a longtime ally and advocator, activist in all of the world, I would say. And she's Councilwoman and Hereditary Drumkeeper of the Womens Scalp Dance Society of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma. And as I mentioned, activist, environmentalist, actress, and published author. So Casey, I'm going to turn it over to you now. And I'm going to put myself on mute.
I appreciate those good words and the good intentions that are going on here. And this sacred water came to join us this day from this territory here in north central Oklahoma in the occupied territory. That used to be the area of the Wichita, where they lived, and now the Ponca, as well as 39 other tribes, are here. Everywhere we are is a sacred place and a sacred time. And oftentimes when we're sun dancing and sacrificing, those ones will go in front of you, those sacred ones, and pour this water like this and remind you of your thirst. Remind you that not everyone has access to water, and yet we are made from her. And when we feel the thirst and we hear her voice and we talk about the prayers that we have for everywhere and everything, we hear the ripple of the stream. We hear the power of the thunder. We see the mist roll in the fogs over the rivers.
Oh.
We hear all of the relatives that are speaking in her name. At one time, I was crossing over a creek, Sand Creek, where a massacre happened, and water spoke to me. And she cried, and I cried. And she told me of the feel and the sound and the taste of bayonets and baby's blood. She talked about the cruelty of the people and the healing that happened thereafter. And she reminded me of something. She said over and over again, in her way, the water can never forget. The water can never forget.
Right.
The water can never forget. The water can never forget. So on this day when we come together and we join with her on the sacred moment that we're allowed to be with her, and we listen to her voice and we feel her inside us, and we give thanks for the ancestors that have brought us this far. We think about the ones that she has not forgotten. Yesterday, LaDonna, brave bull Allard, a fierce water protector, began a journey on the other side. Yesterday, families all over the globe looked for this sacred water. Yesterday, this water flowed through our pipes in our homes and down the rivers and into the Amazon. And ice melted on the poles, and snow came down in the northern parts, and the ocean crashed against the shores, and the thunders gave voice to their gift of water wherever she was needed. And underneath the earth's skin, this milk, this sacred water flowed so that you and I could be here today. And as we speak today in the language that we understand each other in, she speaks inside us and gives us the voice and gives us the thoughts and gives us the spirit and gives us life. And within those very ones that call themselves decision makers, she flows. So today, we're going to join with her and set our egos aside and be the water and be the life for the generations to come, for all those unborns. We're here today. Ndari Wakanda, Wakanda Khube, Ni Khube. Ni kanitazi weep the humbly, weep the humbly, weep the humbly. Ni kanitazi weep the humbly. Ni kanitazi weep the humbly, weep the humbly. Weep the humbly, ni kanitazi, weep the humbly, ni kanitazi, weep the humbly, weep the humbly, weep the humbly, ni kanitazi. Weep the humbly. Ni kanitazi, weep the humbly, weep the humbly, weep the humbly. Ni kanitazi, weep the humbly. Sacred water, you are life, and we thank you for your blessing. At this moment, may we feel the thirst strongly in our mouths, in our spirits, in our minds, that we may appreciate you in the truest sense, and that we might pray for you, yourself, for your ancestors, for your ones to come. You, the ancient one, you, the newborn, you, the unborn, you, the spirit of all that is. We thank you, sacred water. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you for every form that you come in, for every gift that you bring us, for this life that we have here on our sacred Mother Earth. We ask you, sacred water, reach around into the humans that we're in touch with. Reach around. You live within each one of them. Awaken them. Awaken them. Help them to understand that we are part of all that is, not separate from, not above, not controlling, but part of. Humble us into the softest place of love that you can take us, so that we may understand the first love when we came onto this earth, when we were of water, fire, air, and earth, and we got the breath from the winds and became part of this sacredness that is life here on Mother Earth. We love you, sacred water. We love you, sacred water. We thank you, sacred water. We offer to ourselves this gift of you, and we offer ourselves as a gift to you. Weep the huh. Weep the huh. Weep the huh. Weep the huh. Sha. Take a drink of your water. Oh, it's so good. Love you. Whew. I'm charged now. Thank you. It's good to be among you all. I wanted to tell you one last thing here. I ran across a picture that was sent to me of my brother, Leonard Crow Dog's father, Henry. And he said, the earth is a living thing. Mountains speak, trees sing, lakes can think. Pebbles have a soul. Rocks have power. Sha.
Thank you so much for that, Casey.
I hope you unmuted me, Sarah. I'm not sure if it worked or not.
Yes, you're fine.
Okay,
Wonderful.
sorry.
No, that's, it took me a moment to get everybody muted. We haven't really done this before, so thank you all so much for your patience.
Okay. Cook's Jam, Casey, thank you for the water blessing and the prayers, and reminding us that water has ancestral collective memory through time, and that we're all here, and what we're here for is the water and Mother Earth and our Creator's teachings, and the beautiful words that you spoke, and from your heart and from our ancestors together and with our Creator. And that gives us a lot of the purpose and reason we exist, and the purpose and reason we're here today in a circle intercontinentally. And there may be some from outside of North America as well. I'm not sure, I can't see the whole screen, but thank you so much, Casey, for doing that for us today. And yes, the water charges your body, charges your mind, body, and spirit, and gives you that energy we need for this work. So I'm going to call upon Sarah to take away the first part of the take action.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we've mostly been doing it, but if you haven't now, please put in the chat whose Indigenous lands you're on, and if you don't know, you can go to native-lands.ca and find out and let us know. We will add some of that info into the email you'll get tomorrow with all the actions, the recording, and the follow-along guide with all the links you'll see today, and if more additional ones to help on the Stop TMX and the Defund Line 3 fights. Comments are open in that guide. If you're comfortable using them, please go right ahead. And that is our first action. So back to you, Judy.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your weekend to do these. We're just calling them water blessings that we did, and then water actions. So we're going to be doing them over the course of the next, well, we said 7 months, but if the COP26 is moved to the spring, it could be very much a year. But I'd like to introduce Eriel Deranger. She's Executive Director of the Indigenous Climate Action. So she's a member of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, and she's a mother of 2 and comes from a family of Indigenous right advocates fighting for recognition and sovereignty and autonomy of their Indigenous lands and territory, is now known what is called Treaty 8 Canada. And she'll introduce her traditional name, her traditional pronunciation for her Athabasca Chipewyan tribe. Eriel?
Thank you, Masicho. And Masi, thank you so much to Casey. It's so great to see your face again and hear your voice. Thank you for the opening prayer. So, Iklanete, Dënesòłiné ta Eriel ts'ékui hushe, Deranger betsini hasli. So my name is Eriel Ts'ékui, and it means Thunder Woman in my language, which is Dënesòłiné or Dene. And we are related to the Dene of the South. So the Dene of the South and the Dene of the North, we come from the same bloodlines, and a lot of our language is the same. They say hello as Eyate, and we say Iklanete. So I just want to make sure that we understand that the borders that separate us are colonial borders, and that our people have traversed these lands of Turtle Island for millennia. And when I say that Casey's my relative, I mean she's my relative because our families traded and lived in these lands for millennia. And I just want to thank you, my elder, my auntie, my grandmother, Casey. And I want to thank my aunties and my cousins, Judy, and all the folks that are out on the coast right now. And I love to see the face of Doreen, who will be speaking after me. I haven't seen you in so long. So much love to you, and so much love to you as well, Joy, who will also be speaking. And of course, Eugene. It's so great to see everyone. And I think this is such a beautiful way of opening up Earth Week. And I just want to give so much gratitude to everyone who has organized this event and the importance of this as we are moving towards having this big, huge international climate conference on the heels of a global pandemic. We are witnessing an imbalance, a great imbalance, an imbalance of a relationship with our lands and our territory, and a balance of power. And as we move towards these big gatherings, we are seeing the power of Indigenous peoples. Throughout the last 15 years, I have been working as a climate activist alongside many groups, including my own community, the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. And we actually call ourselves Dënesųłiné, or people of the willow, which is reference to our lands and our territories, which exist in the Peace Athabasca Delta, one of the world's last remaining inland freshwater deltas of the world. And I know all too well what this imbalance means. My territories have been ravaged and ripped apart, destroyed and contaminated for the extraction of dirty fossil fuels known as the Alberta tar sands. And these products are being shipped through pipelines, such as the Tran Mountain pipeline and Line 3, and other many different pipelines that traverse across Turtle Island, and then refined in factories that exist outside communities like Casey's community. So our fights are intrinsically connected. And as we talk about global climate change, we have leaders meeting at the national level, at the international level, that are proposing false solutions that further embed us into fossil fuel extractions. Canada's current climate plan, the Pan-Canadian Framework on Climate Change, actually allows the continuation of fossil fuel extraction and allows for pipelines. And even right now, we have a country that is pushing forward the Trans Mountain pipeline by purchasing these pipelines. And we need real plans that actually drive real action and an ability towards a just energy transition that upholds the relationship between the Crown or the colonists and Indigenous peoples. We can't afford to continue in the status quo business as usual, and we must take real action. Indigenous Climate Action recently released a report that critiques Canada's Pan-Canadian Framework and healthy environments and healthy economies, and looks at how these reports exclude Indigenous climate leadership and people and undermine our self-determination and foreclose on some of the most powerful forces of transformative systemic change that we so desperately need. These imbalances in our ways in which we look at the lands as something to be dominated have resulted in this imbalance of our climate, imbalance of our relationships with the natural world, and have resulted in even this global pandemic. As the climate continues to change, we will see more diseases not only of the mind, but diseases of our bodies and diseases of our spirits. It is Indigenous peoples that hold those relationships most closely. We are the ones that have remained and held our ties, that speak to the waters, speak to the land, speak to the animals, and speak to the spirits of all things. We are all related, all my relations. And so as we talk about ways in which we can take action together, we must support each other. We must support the fact that Indigenous peoples must have a seat at the table and must have adequate resources and power to be able to be a part of decision making to ensure that whatever plans are being created within the Biden Climate Summit, the COP26 in Glasgow, and the Canadian policy making here in this country, that Indigenous peoples' free, prior, and informed consent is upheld and uplifted, respected, and ensured when we are developing climate policy, because we are first and foremost to feel the impacts of climate change, but we can be the first and foremost to be driving solutions that re-establish our relationships with the natural world. I want to thank the West Coast folks for putting this on. Judy, thank you so much for inviting me to come and participate in this. And I want to say that all of our collective liberation, all of our liberation is caught up We must stand in solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, Asian American, and Pacific Island folks who are experiencing some of the most extreme violence and racism. Because as the clutches of capitalism are falling apart, as the clutches of these systems are falling apart, it is our people that are feeling the violence. The violence of white supremacy falling apart is our bodies, our lives, our people, and our lands. So I stand in solidarity with all of my BIPOC brothers and sisters, and I hope that we can all come together to dismantle systems of white supremacy, colonization, colonialism, and extractivism. Hi, Masicho.
Kiksham, Eriel, thank you so much. I just wanted to mention Eriel's the Executive Director of Indigenous Climate Action. And also prior to that, Eriel worked with her First Nation to build one of the largest intersectional Keep It in the Ground campaigns, the International Indigenous Tar Sands Campaign, challenging the expansion of Alberta's tar sands. So thank you so much, Eriel, for your good comments and getting us started and mentioning the Biden-Trudeau Earth Day Summit happening next week, and also the COP26 international climate work that's going to be done. So I'd like to next introduce Doreen Bernard. And Doreen is a Shubin Caddy member. Hopefully I said that right. If you'll have to say it correct. Is a mom, grandmother, survivor, traditionalist, water protector, water walker, teacher, activist, and Mi'kmaq herbalist. Doreen coordinates the grassroots grandmother circle in social justice work, child welfare issues, missing and murdered Indigenous women, cultural education, and water teachings. Inspired by her grandchildren and the late grandmother, Josephine Madamin, Mother Earth water walker. Thank you so much, Doreen, for being with us. I'll turn it right over to you.
Wait, Nindelawasi, Gesadam Dandali Ulnuwe, Sabaganegati, Mi'kmaq. Yes, and I am very, very thankful to be invited to come in and speak at this this gathering. I'd like to share a little bit about what's happening on the Atlantic coast. You know, if we go from west to east, there's a few things happening here that are connected to the water and the pipelines coming up from the United States. So we have the maritime pipeline from Philadelphia coming up to through Massachusetts and up through to Canada, to the Atlantic region. So that snake is coming, and you know we're on the front line of the Alton gas storage, you know, the salt cavern storage, trying to protect our water, our river, from the brining. You know, that they want to extract all the salt from these caverns to store the gas, fracked gas, and use our river, the Sabaganegati River, to solution mine 18 caverns. You know, these things are huge. They're like 10-story tall, office building size, holes in the ground, a mile underground. And all the salt, they want to just dump it into our river, take our river to use the water, you know, to solution mine these out over the next 30 years. You know, this is a 50-year project they're talking about. And then the other part of the project is the Goldboro LNG terminal, where they plan to export the gas, you know, over to overseas. So our people are split. It's such a sad thing that's happening here, because you know, the chiefs in one part of the province are signing deals with these corporations, while the other part in our territory, you know, in Sabaganegati, we're against the the project where they want to build these caverns, but in Cape Breton, you know, where they want to put the LNG terminal, they're signing deals, even forming companies, Mi'kmaq companies that are going to be providing services and to the man camp, 5,000 man camp that is going to be built just to house the workers that are going to be building the LNG terminal. You know, it's bigger than most of the towns. 5,000 man camp. Imagine, you know, I feel really hurt as a grandmother. Because, you know, we're down here on the front line trying to stop one part of this project, one part of this beast. You know, I said, we're trying to stop the belly of the snake while they're up there making deals to build the head of the snake. And it's really sad that even we're not being consulted. The women, the communities are not being consulted, because had they consulted us in our communities, we would have told them that we don't need, you know, we don't need frack gas. We don't need fracking in Nova Scotia or Mi'kmaq anywhere. You know, they fought against fracking in New Brunswick. The Mi'kmaq stopped, you know, in Elsipogtog, they stopped fracking from happening in their territory. And yet now we're setting ourselves up here for fracking to happen, to fill up those 18 caverns, you know, like for the future. So I really feel that we, the women, you know, it's really sad because the Native Women Association has also, you know, signed deals with them to take money from these corporations to develop protocols, safety protocols for the women that are going to be working there. You know, that's the kind of, I was like, they never consulted us. We would have told them, no, we don't need man camps here. We have too many missing and murdered Indigenous women, and too many of our people are at risk, you know, for this kind of project. So I think a lot of the work that we have to do now is to organize ourselves. It looks like the organizations that are supposed to be representing us aren't representing us, and it split our communities. It split our nation. You know, it's really sad to see. You know, I find out that this deal was signed in 2015. That's the year we were down at the Treaty Truck House building, you know, stopping the Alton gas, sitting in front of their gate and, you know, stopping them from doing any work on that dike, you know, on the river. And we were wondering where are all our leaders? Where are the chiefs? Where are the people that are supposed to be supporting us? You know, and that's the year that Ts'ékui left the Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative. You know, the termination table is what I call it, but the negotiation table, when they left that group because we weren't being supported. It was really sad, you know, that we had to leave the Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative, the KMK is what we call them. We had to leave them because they would not stand up with ts'ékui against the Alton Gas project. So we're not a part of that negotiation table. We are autonomous by ourselves. You know, we don't get the millions of dollars of negotiating, what they call it, consultation dollars that are going to these larger, this larger negotiation table. So we have to do our own science. You know, we did a lot of our own science on that river to prove to them how many species were living in that river, what kind of fish. A lot of the science, they had students from universities doing science on the river, on the species of the river at that time, and they were collecting data when the fish weren't there. They weren't spawning at that time. You know, they were counting fish in May that they should have been counting in January when they spawn. You know, it was just, there was no traditional knowledge collected really on our treaty rights to our land, our water, our resources, where we fish, where we hunt. You know, we have some of the oldest treaties in the world, peace and friendship treaties here in Mi'kma'ki. So it was, we never ceded our land. And so we've been fighting amongst ourselves, seems to me, in the last little while, even when when the fishing war started again after 20 some years, we're back to fighting for our rights to fish after winning, you know, Supreme Court decisions that that recognize our rights, our treaty rights. And we're still, you know, just the season will start soon and all the fighting will start again. The way the government is setting our people up to be criminalized for fishing in our own territory. So there's a lot of things happening here in Mi'kma'ki, and would ask for prayers from our brothers and sisters everywhere to help us. You know, I ask our grandmothers and grandfathers to give us that strength, that knowledge, you know, the wisdom that we need, the courage to stand up together. Yes. There's a lot of things happening, and I call it an environmental racism. And it's, you know, everywhere we look, there's gold mining. They want to destroy waterways. It's like it has us running in all different directions, you know, trying to stand in front of these corporations. Yes. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Doreen, for your wonderful words and letting us know what's happening in the Atlantic provinces, the ocean, and, you know, the people in the East. It's important we understand where we are and what currently we're facing, and our prayers that are needed from East Coast to the West Coast to, you know, to southern tip to the northern tip of our Mother Earth. I'd like to also now introduce another speaker. Since Standing Rock in 2016, the climate movement has embraced frontline Indigenous leadership and many new relationships, some what we're making here today, and experiments in organizing together have happened like today as well. I'd like to introduce Joyce Braun, who was the first camper at Standing Rock and stayed till the forced eviction in February 2017, spending 10 months on the ground. Joyce Braun is a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. She is a mother, a wife, a grandmother, and she's fought hard to protect her own homelands against DAPL and Keystone XL pipeline while supporting threats of uranium and gold mining in the sacred Black Hills. She's a community organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Joyce, could we ask you to step forward, please? Thank you.
I'm happy you happy. It's actually Joy. So
oh, sorry, Joy. Did I say Joyce? So I'm sorry, Joy. Thank you.
Right.
Like the ear here.
Right, can you do me a favor?
Icky. So I'm happy you happy. Chante washte na pechiuza happy. Wambly wikawi imachi happy. Wambly paha imataha. My name is Joy Braun, our Eagle Feather Woman, a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I am Ohenupa and Itazi Picho. There's 4 bands here on Cheyenne River, and so those are the 2 bands that I'm from. Yeah, I do work for IEN, but I didn't start out with IEN. I started out making cinnamon rolls just to try to get up to the front lines. And I asked my youth what they wanted to do. With regards to fighting on the front lines, you know, these are the fights that will rip your soul, tear your heart, put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, but it's worth every second of it because it's for the next 7 generations. It's not for me. It's not for my kids. It's for my great-grandchildren, and for those that are not born yet. As Mom Casey was saying, you know, we're all related here. Wherever you're tuning in from today, we are all related, and it's those relationships that we absolutely need in order to build a world that is not only possible but is necessary. At Standing Rock, the grassroots people called and asked for help because we had fought and won Keystone XL. I always call it a zombie pipeline. But we had fought and won, so they called and they asked us if they wanted us to go up there and help. So I called up our youth and I said, do you want to go fight another pipeline? But it's like what my colleagues always say, it's kind of like we're doing whack-a-mole. You know, it's like we got one fight over here, and we got one fight over here, we got LNG, we got a pipeline, and we got a terminal going on over here, we got a plastics plant going on over here. It's like we're always doing this whack-a-mole stuff. In order for us to win, we have to unite. In order for us to win, Indigenous people must be at the forefront. This movement, this climate justice movement, will not win unless Indigenous people are at the forefront. This is really about indigenizing movement, putting our voices at the front because we're the ones that know. We're the ones that know that water truly is life, that land and air and the minerals and the rocks and the plants, everything around us is necessary in order for us to survive. And just like my relative who spoke just before us, where she was talking about how different groups within our own communities fight amongst each other, that happens. It happens. I mean, just recently with the Dakota Access Pipeline fight, here's Standing Rock and Cheyenne River and Yankton and Oglala and all these Oceti Shakoi tribes saying, stop this pipeline because it's illegal. It doesn't have all the permits. It never had all the permits for it. It's an illegal pipeline. But then you have 3 affiliated tribes just up north saying, no, keep it in the ground. Let's keep fracking. Let's keep doing this because we need our check. We need our money. No, you don't need your check and you don't need your money because that doesn't mean anything if you got cancer and you're dead or you're burying your grandchild because they had an asthma attack. It doesn't mean anything. Our relationships are what matter. Building our relationships are what matter. And so when we were building allyships with Dakota Access Pipeline, we called on the relationships that we built with Keystone XL. And that did include reaching out to our non-native brothers and sisters, farmers and ranchers. I never thought that I would be friends with farmers and ranchers in deep red Nebraska, Montana, and South Dakota. Because this is some of the biggest racist states here in the South, right? They're terribly racist. And so I never thought that I would be friends like that. And even my mom, Casey, long time ago, the Ponca and the Lakota were enemies. But she's my mom. She's my Ina. And so we've built all these relationships and we've built on that, and we must do that. Updates on Keystone XL. Like I said before, it's called a zombie pipeline. There's a lawsuit that some of the governors, 21 governors here in so-called United States have are doing, and they're trying to bring back the stupid Keystone XL. See, the nature of executive orders with presidential executive orders is that they can be transient and they can be overturned. And you saw that when the former president, Trump, signed Keystone XL and DAPL 2 days into his office, right? So then Biden on day one said, no, we're gonna reverse that. All he did was reverse the international crossing, which had already been completed. So it's just on hold right now. And of course, the other big fight that was mentioned, I think it was mentioned earlier, was the Enbridge Line 3 fight. And this is the one that's happening, big part of it in Minnesota. And Enbridge is trying to say that it's a replacement pipeline. It's not a replacement pipeline. About 2/3 of the pipeline in Minnesota is actually new ground, has not had an environmental impact study done on it. The Army Corps of Engineers is trying to put a rubber stamp on the hundreds of water crossings in Minnesota, threatening wild rice beds, huge amounts of wild rice beds. And the police are getting, what the police do is they give a receipt to Enbridge. Enbridge then pays them. So they get reimbursed for all their policing activity. And so something as simple as a trespass, they've been putting people in chains and keeping them over 24 hours and strip searching women. And there was one young girl who was on another webinar that my daughter did, and she had a gun pointed point blank at her head while she was praying. This is the kind of stuff that these corporations do. This is the kind of stuff that Dakota Access did with Energy Transfer Partners. This is the kind of surveillance that we faced here with fighting Keystone XL. Even my friend LaDonna's funeral, she hadn't left this world more than 5 minutes and the FBI were at her house. So this is the kind of stuff that we have to face. But I do know that together, that we are stronger. I do know together that we can forge alliances. And forging those alliances means that we have to sometimes face deep-seated prejudices. And I've been saying this for a while now. Racism is the most challenging issue that we face. And you're seeing that happen now with Black lives, with Asian, Indigenous people are killed at an even greater rate than Black and Asian people here in so-called United States per capita. But racism is the most challenging issue. It is at the heart and soul of colonization. It is the heart and soul of capitalism. It is at the heart and soul of greed. And until we start facing off greed and understanding that there needs to be a great morality shift in our identities of how we interrelate with the world, then we are not going to change. But I saw things. I saw things and I've witnessed things that can only be explained through the power of spirit. And I'm not a Christian. I'm not any of that kind of stuff. I'm just me. I'm just Lakota. But I've seen things and I've witnessed things and I've seen the power that unity can bring. So yes, there's whack-a-mole going on. And yes, we have to pay attention to each and every single one of these fights. But we also need to look at the solutions and not false solutions. False solutions include carbon credits and carbon offsets and all that baloney. That's all false solutions designed to allow polluters to continue to pollute and greed to continue to infest the world that we live in. So say no to those things. Say no to carbon offsets, say no to carbon credits, and remember that we must have free, prior, informed consent for all Indigenous people. Because we are sovereign, and we have to claim our sovereignty. We have to claim who we are as Indigenous people and not be identified by these colonizers that are only here on our land for only a very short time. 527 years. That's a blink in the eye for the thousands and thousands of years that our nations have been here. And long after their nations are long dead and gone, we are still going to be here. Only we're going to be living in a clean, beautiful, wonderful world surrounded by our grandchildren and their grandchildren. So with that, Tulamae Wopilatanka, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. It's been great seeing everybody. Oh man, I miss some of you guys so much. But Wopila.
Kuksham, Joy, thank you for your words and letting us know what, on the front line and in our communities and in our homes, what's going on with KXL and Line 3 and, how they all connect up and then how we need to come together across all four directions. So it's action time again. I'd like to call upon Sarah to take some action again. Sarah, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chief Judy. Okay. Wonderful. So we did really well in the first action. I think nearly everyone posted their lands in the chat, which is fantastic. If I get very ambitious, I will plot those on the map and share it with you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some action on the banks. So part of the fight around Line 3 has been Enbridge, which is a Canadian company, is using all these billions of dollars from big banks to build Line 3. And of those, Canadian banks are the worst. And up here north of the Medicine Line, Canadian banks don't really get a lot of pushback. They sort of fly under the radar, and everyone just assumes their power is sort of inviolable and you can't touch it. So in the last 18 months or so, there's been a strong campaign push out of Stop the Money Pipeline, working with Tarahuska and the Gnu Collective. Joy, you've been on many, I think, of some of those calls. And we're seeing movement. We're seeing real movement. When banks, when their kids come to them and ask, is it, RBC, Chase Bank, Scotia Bank, these are people. And the sense we're getting is that, a lot of this sort of more, reasonable folks who can look at a spreadsheet and see not just profit, but that their profit might be in trouble if in 15 years no one can, fossil fuels have destroyed our planet. So that's a good thing, but it's not moving fast enough. And as we've seen with governments and legal cases, it can take so very long to move them, and you have to wait while they happen. So this is a direct way we can demand, with our power as a movement and our power also as retail consumers. Everybody has a bank, and threatening to leave them and making it basically toxic to work for or bank with them has a real impact. And so we are moving them. So we're going to move them a little more today. And once you've taken one or two of these actions, you will be on the Coast Protectors list. So we'll send out more actions. That doesn't mean you have to stay on that list. If you only want to participate today, that's fine. But more of these that happen, then we'll graduate to things like phone calls. And my gosh, hopefully the pandemic will be under control at some point and we can start camping out at their bank branches, because that's where we're at in terms of making moves this year. This is a big year. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's just all be very, oh my gosh, I think it's going to work. Okay, there we go. You can see my screen. So this is the top 5 Canadian financiers of Enbridge, and you can see the billions we're talking with TD Bank, Bank of Montreal, Scotiabank, RBC, and CIBC. You know, there's more, but these are the top 5. And it's been pretty funny working with the climate movement and the Indigenous rights movement across Turtle Island, because you so rarely hear people say things like the Canadian energy company Enbridge, and you want to say like, whoa, 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 no, we don't want them. It's fine. So what we're going to do today is we're going to tell them to defund Line 3. We've made it very easy. We have these tools. So I spend some time and I find their email addresses and write a draft letter, and then we, you know, a bunch of people look for it, look through it and give feedback. So you should be able to, you can just click and send what we've written, or take a moment and customize. Let me just see if I can get back to the chat here somehow. Oh yes, there we go. Great. All right, so we've gone, it's a Coast Protectors link, and it's coastprotectors.ca, Canadian Banks defund Line 3. So hopefully everybody can click on that, and I'll do it with you, so we're all doing it together. Okay, here we go. So we've got, okay, we know this is, they're funding this. We want them to stop. And we do know that these kind of approaches to their CEOs make a difference. You know, their employees hear about it. They talk about it on their own message boards. So we're sort of like creating this noise that they're not going to be able to ignore until we're able to make the noise we need to make on the streets, which I really, really miss. Great. So I'm just going to enter. So Sarah Bueller, my email address, which everyone can now have, and just let me know if you have questions or comments. So here's the letter, and it's long, but you can edit. And then click send your email. Yeah. Now what you can do is leave this tab up, and then later on, or later this week, or frankly, like if you want to do it every day a couple of times, we will not say no, because they need to know that not only are we watching and listening, we're not going to stop, and more people are doing it and more people are paying attention. Wonderful. So you'll also get an email thanking you and giving you some links. So if you feel moved, you can share to your Twitter or your Facebook, or send an email to your family and friends and that kind of thing. Okay, great. So that walks us through. I'm going to stop screen sharing. There we go. Yes, keep sending. Great comment, Kiki. Absolutely. And if you can send one on one subject and tomorrow you feel differently, you know, just let them know how you're feeling. They need to know. All right, let me just double check here. So I think that one is done. And just a reminder that we've got the follow along document with all of these actions and all of these links. And the last thing I'll say about defund Line 3 is on May 7th, depending on how the trial of Derek Chauvin, the murderer of George Floyd, goes, which is also in Minnesota, so it's a very heavy time for our Minnesota relatives. There's lots of anxiety and stress and grief on the streets, so we will keep flexible on that, but we're going to do a global day of action to defund Line 3. So I'm just going to give you all the link, and if you have questions or don't want to look at that now, that's fine, you can get in touch with me. But this is the action sort of toolkit, and it walks you through, you know, if you can host a party or have a dinner, you can definitely, you can organize an action. So there we go. And I'll put just the fundraising links. There's quite a few of them. The front lines, you know, they are doing what so much of us wish we could do. For every water protector and land defender, there's thousands at home who cannot make it to the territory. So we really advocate funding the front lines. There's, I've just posted in the chat, and it's on both the follow along. We've got Tiny House Warriors and the Braided Warriors, which you'll hear from shortly. And the Indigenous youth who blocked some insurance company last week. And then there's the Line 3 Water Protectors Legal Defense Fund, which is tax deductible in the U.S. There's a, and if there's a fundraiser.com that you can add there. It's almost up to $40,000. All the money goes to bail and legal support work for Line 3 water protectors. So I hope folks will take the moment to give generously for those who risk and, you know, pay the cost so heavily of frontline work. Whew, okay, that is a lot of talking, and we are going to go back, I believe, to Judy. Did you want to introduce Eugene, or shall I?
Go ahead, Sarah. I see he's on next. And can you give us clarification about Braided Warrior Society? Because I do have Tiny House Warrior on my agenda, but I don't see Braided House.
Yes.
Or Braided. Sorry.
I just got a message sort of before we started. So okay. I think I see someone from there who's on board. Okay. So yes.
Can I suggest that you introduce Eugene, and then we'll do Eugene, and then you can introduce Braided Society Warrior, and then I can introduce the Tiny House after that. Okay, thank
Wonderful. You. Love it, thank you. So Eugene Kung is a staff lawyer with West Coast, and he West Coast Environmental Law. He's been working on tar sands, pipelines, and tankers for a decade. Working with the Secwepemc Nation here in Coast Salish Territory with the Sacred Trust Initiative, as well as pro bono work with a variety of causes. He's a good friend. We've been organizing for, it seems like, forever to stop the Trans Mountain pipeline. It just will not go, but we've delayed it unbelievably. And you've heard folks talk today about free, prior, and informed consent, which is a key part of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that's part of the demands we're making on these banks and insurers, is to incorporate those policies into their business. So Eugene's going to walk us through what that means, and then we will talk to the Braided Warriors. So Braided Warriors, if you want to put yourself on kind of notice, and Eugene, take it away if you're able to unmute yourself. Let's see. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah and Cookie, for the invitation to speak today. It's really an honor to have been invited to join this incredibly powerful lineup of matriarchs who I consider heroes of my own. And so I just really feel blessed to be able to join you here today. I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, also known as Vancouver. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about free, prior, and informed consent. And, you know, we've been talking a lot. Joey mentioned the kind of whack-a-mole that often happens in terms of projects. You know, by the time projects either get to the regulatory stage or even sometimes the construction stage, you know, is when a lot of mobilizing happens. And what I really like about these actions, these campaigns like Stop the Money Pipeline, is that it is an opportunity to stop these destructive projects before they even get to these stages where we have to organize bodies to, on the front lines, or to come and engage in Byzantine regulatory processes with tons of technical information that most people aren't interested in. And I think free, prior, informed consent is one of these fundamental things that, if we move forward in a good way, can actually achieve that. So free, prior, informed consent, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term. You're probably familiar that it's one of the key aspects of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which itself was a product of decades of organizing and hard work and compromise before being brought forward at the UN and being passed. And as you probably also know, the 4 nation states who initially opposed the passing of UNDRIP were Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand. And if you just look at their colonial history, it's not a wonder why, and we see where some of these stories are popping up around the world. Of course, it's not exclusive to those 4 countries, but certainly something that we see a lot of. And so, the elements of UNDRIP is essentially is grounded in self-determination. We've heard a lot about that already, and so these concepts that have been agreed upon to follow in order to advance Indigenous rights. And the elements are very clear. I'm just going to walk through them very quickly. Free, as in free of interference, free of coercion and duress, which can take all kinds of forms, including, I would suggest, if that is your only choice for economic activity, that there's a form of duress there. Prior, of course, meaning before any of the impacts have happened. This is a really important one. It shouldn't be. It seems very basic, but I've heard directly from the mouth of mining executives at a public event for lawyers that they thought that FPIC, free, prior, informed consent, in order to fully understand the impacts, a community had to live with a project for a while, which completely misses the whole point of this. Informed, of course, is about the impacts. It is about the ability to apply traditional knowledge, to apply contemporary scientific knowledge, or a combination of both, and in particular to apply the lens, what I think about as a legal lens, of Indigenous legal lens, to a project. So the thresholds for an impact may be different depending on which legal tradition you're coming from. And consent, of course, is the ability to say yes or no and have that respected. So these, again, these concepts should not be that difficult to wrestle with, but what we've seen, I think, in particular on the state level, has been various attempts to move it forward. Some of them, unfortunately, have had the impact of essentially watering it down. And so I think it's really important, just like have to be really aware of the false solutions that are sometimes often put forward on climate. There's a parallel with false solutions when it comes to, for example, a state or a company's Indigenous rights policy that essentially upholds the status quo, upholds, for example, a consultation framework rather than a consent framework. Mm-hmm. So we've definitely, seen, and I've discussed that state application of free, prior, and informed consent in the United Nations Declaration has generally not met this minimum standard, right? But there's some movement there. There's countries like Bolivia who have put forward and embedded free, prior, and informed consent into their laws. There are some movements here in the province of BC in Canada for laws that start a process of adopting the United Nations Declaration. It's not, I think that these are important steps for political as well as legal reasons, but I also think it's important to note that it's not that Canada has lacked the legal tools to uphold and respect Indigenous laws for a long time. So there's many aspects to this, including how these are applied. But as you can imagine, state actors alone, especially those whose entire economies are based on colonial extractivism, are not going to willingly and quickly come to the table, and especially in the time frame that we're talking about in terms of the climate crisis. And that's where third parties and private actors come in as well, and where the connections with the funders, with the insurance companies that are insuring these projects, with the credit rating agencies that are looking at the risk and so on, where they can actually have a role. And so again, we've had a few false starts, or at least partial victories, perhaps is another way to think about it, through the very gradual advancement of free, prior, and informed consent. For example, the Equator Principles, number 3, talks about these things, but it doesn't quite go far enough in order to actually require the consent of Indigenous peoples. And again, kind of trying to water it down to something like seeking consent or consulting in order to with the goal of consent. And this is kind of where we have to continue to be pushing forward to make sure that we don't have these PR-driven policies that actually don't move the needle. And we're seeing some of this happen already. There's a Dutch bank called ABN AMRO that's adopted a free, prior, informed consent policy, which means that they will not invest in any projects that don't have free, prior, and informed consent. The insurance regulator in Washington State just started considering free, prior, and informed consent in their insurance regulation. And so these things are starting to happen. And part of the reason is a similar reason, I think, that the financial sector is taking climate seriously. It's because it actually poses a material risk to their business and their business models. And the decades and centuries of ignoring these problems is actually now costing money. And so, for me, I think I see this as a tool, just like I see most Western law as a tool, and that it needs to be wielded in the right way. And so I do think that there's a lot of potential for improving and incorporating free, prior, and informed consent, embedding that in state and private practice. Even the incremental move of costing a pipeline company, for example, 5% more because of the risks associated with proceeding without free, prior, and informed consent is going to make many projects, which are already on the very marginal in terms of their economics, make them uneconomic. Of course, we want to go further. We need to have this embedded within both state laws and policies, but but to remind people that this is meant to be a minimum standard. It's not the ceiling, it's the floor. And companies exceed legal minimums all the time. So in my view, it's not an excuse to say, well, we're following the consent regime that 150 years of colonial rule has come up with. No, it has to act, there's no reason to not go beyond what the legal minimums are. Companies do that all the time in other areas. So that, I think, is my time. Again, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, and really looking forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eugene. Eugene's been such a stalwart over the years of this campaign, gracefully answering a lot of naive questions from people like me about the possibilities of legal resistance, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate you here today. Thank you so much, Eugene. I'd like to introduce now a member and a representative today of the Braided Warriors. The Braided Warriors are a group of Indigenous youths organizing together on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples here in so-called Vancouver. And in February, they really kicked off the fight against insurers locking down to the entrances of Liberty Mutual and Chubb offices in so-called Vancouver, demanding that those insurers stop extending insurance, like project critical insurance, to the Trans Mountain pipeline and stop insuring genocide. So I'm just going to make sure they're here. Excellent. Ask to unmute. So please go ahead, take it away. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. And again, I want to thank everyone that has put this event together and allowed us to come together and share in this circle. Like as you mentioned, the Braided Warriors have been focused on our Stop Insurance Genocide campaign, targeting the insurers of the Trans Mountain pipeline, specifically the and Liberty Mutual here in so-called Vancouver. We recognize that these insurance companies they see us as a risk liability. They realize that Indigenous defenders pose a risk to these ecocidal projects of resource extraction, and they account for that when they make these contracts. But because of that, it's proved that what we're doing is successful in our fights when we target these companies, that they fear the power that we hold collectively. Trans Mountain Pipeline is directly misleading their insurers by suggesting that they have secured their land base and the Indigenous consent required to push this pipeline through. And we all know that that is not the case. There has been a lack of consent and free, prior, and informed consent when talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline specifically, and especially since it is going through unceded territories that were never surrendered, it is being pushed illegally. And we recognize that these companies, they don't care about matters of the heart. We cannot appeal to them about our genocide through sharing our pain, our sorrows. The only thing that they really recognize is the language of money. And so in order to win this fight against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, we need to cost these companies money. And to do so, when it comes to insurance companies, the only way to really cost them money is by tarnishing their name, making it known that these people are actively participating in genocide. And also, as we saw in the offices of AIG, they are directly calling police to brutalize Indigenous youth who are there in ceremony. We faced a lot of violence that 1 week in August. Ever since then, all our actions have seen an increase of police violence and brutalization. And basically, the only purpose of the insurers is to financially compensate the pipeline once accidents and spills do happen. And again, it's not a matter of if the pipeline spills. We all know that it is just a matter of time. And these companies, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, they will continue to financially benefit even after they have polluted and poisoned the land and the water, leaving wreckage behind. So another thing that we have to keep in mind is that this is a federally owned pipeline. So it is our pipeline as Canadian citizens, and it is our responsibility and our duty to put a stop to it. And we have the power to shut it down, but we have to go about shutting it down through any means necessary. Any action against the pipeline is good action. And that's why we see people on the front lines chaining themselves to equipment, as we saw in Secwepemc a couple of weeks ago. We had accomplices locked down on drilling equipment, and as well as campaigns to email and call these companies like AIG, Liberty Mutual, spam their lines, spam their emails, request that they drop out. One thing that I do want to point out is that after we did our first campaign, we campaigned against the 3 insurers and we showed up to their offices. The Canada Energy Regulator filed to make all the insurers of Trans Mountain secret. And this motion by them shows that they're terrified of what we can accomplish when we pressure insurance companies to drop these pipelines. Last year, the biggest insurer for Trans Mountain Pipeline, Zurich Insurance, based in Germany, they dropped the Trans Mountain Pipeline after many different direct action events targeting. So clearly, we need to amp up the pressure and keep making it known that these companies are the ones that are financing genocide on our land, and that we're not going to continue allowed to happen. One last thing that I do want to mention is the policing of Indigenous people, and especially land defenders. The Trans Mountain Pipeline has the power to investigate Indigenous land defenders and tell the police who to target in their investigations. And so I think it's very important to remember that these companies are acting in a way that is very morally wrong. And we need to continue to target them, even if they go secret and they make the list of insurers a secret. We are going to continue pressuring these companies that we know are working with the Trans Mountain pipeline until they publicly remove themselves and announce that they have dropped the Trans Mountain pipeline. We are not going to stop until they all publicly withdraw. I think that's all I have to say for today. But again, I want to thank everyone for allowing us to be here, and we continue to keep pressure on all the companies that support genocide, on our MPs. Everyone needs to be parted with our request for them to stop.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Created Warrior Society and to Eugene for updating us and letting us know what's happening with the financing and with the insurance of these pipelines. It's very important we organize ourselves and support one another. I'd like to call upon Ida Manuel now. Ida is a Secwepemc mother and a tiny house warrior, the youngest child of Dr. Grand Chief George Manuel. Ida is auntie and mother of the Tiny House Warriors, a group of land and water protectors building tiny houses for Secwepemc families. The Tiny House Warriors are reestablishing village sites and asserting Secwepemc authority over unceded territories by standing in the way of Trans Mountain pipeline, which threatens their land, water, and everything